Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to another broadcast with us here at Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. If you're joining us for the first time, like almost everybody is today, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world through like 40 live, free, monthly interactive broadcasts. We feature the coolest scientists and explorers on planet Earth. You can catch them all on our YouTube channel, like 4,000 past broadcasts there. There's so much to explore and discover. Now, I'm really excited today because we've got a speaker joining us in Florida. We got so many kids in Arizona, Arkansas, Florida, Texas as well, and it's so warm down there, and I am living vicariously through you because I am in Newfoundland, Canada, where they had to clear 4 feet of snow off my roof yesterday, which is crazy. So thank you for letting me live in summer, even in the middle of winter. I really, really appreciate it. Now, yesterday, I was talking to the amazing folks at Disney Conservation, and they were so excited that I got the chance to bring on Jaret Daniels today. Jaret has been sponsored and funded by their work. He's at the University of Florida, the Florida Museum of Natural History, and today he is here to share some of his amazing work researching, helping protect butterflies and insects. The world of insects are everywhere. Wherever you're joining from around the world, you can go outdoors right now and explore and find some of the most amazing creatures on planet Earth. If you don't know that, hopefully you know that by the end of today's talk. So I'm going to bring him in just a second, but I want to highlight too, we do have a Kahoot today. So between our talk and our Q&A, we're going to have a little 4-question quiz to test your understanding, have some fun for bragging rights. So if you want to pull up that game pin, you can do just that. Now, without further ado, I'm going to bring in Dr. Daniels. Thank you so much for joining us today in sunny Florida, and welcome to the broadcast for the first time ever.
Hey, thanks, Jesse. It's really a pleasure to be here. It's great to be in front of so many really excited people. I'm an entomologist. I have probably the best job in the world. I get a chance to work every day with cool butterflies, bees, other insects all around the US. And today I really want to talk to you about some of the projects that my lab is working on to help save butterflies across the US. And I'm going to really focus today on some of the kind of species that are really struggling to survive on our planet right now. And so these are some of the really cool bugs that I get a chance to work with every day. And on the screen here, you'll see species that occur from the Pacific Northwest down to Southern California and across the East Coast to sunny Florida, right around where I live and work at the University of Florida. And some of these, like the monarch, you'll see as kind of more common species, but on this kind of broad diagram are some species that are kind of really, really in danger. They're actually listed under the U.S. endangered species list as federally endangered or threatened. But today I want to talk specifically about some Florida bugs, because these are ones that I work with regularly and my lab works with, and specifically the 3 butterflies that you see on the lower portion of the screen. And I want to start with one of the rarest of the rare, this little butterfly called the Miami blue. And it's named after Florida's largest city, the city of Miami in Southeast Florida. And while it looks super big on this screen, it actually has a wingspan about the width of your thumbnail. So it's a tiny little butterfly, and it's actually kind of a gator butterfly, because at the University of Florida, we're orange and blue, and this butterfly has a beautiful bright blue upper side and little orange spots all over it. So it's a super gator butterfly for working at the University of Florida. And this is one of the last places on the planet that this butterfly can be found. It's an island chain to the west of Key West in the lower Florida Keys called the Marquesas. And this is well west of Key West. The only way to get here is by boat. And these are uninhabited islands. There are no houses, there are no hotels, there's nothing on these islands but a little bit of upland and a lot of water surrounding them. And they're super beautiful. So this is an up-close view of those islands, and this butterfly lives only right along the white sand beaches that you see on the perimeter of these islands. It occupies a really narrow range of habitat. And this is how you get out to these islands. These are 2 people from my lab, and this is their daily work plan. They get up, they get onto a boat, and they go about 45 miles to the west of Key West in super cool, beautiful water, kind of like the Caribbean, to get to these areas to survey for butterflies. So it's a super cool job. It's a beautiful place to get up and go to work every day. And then what we do here at the University of Florida with a lot of the species that I'm going to be talking about today is we try to conserve them. We try to recover them. And this butterfly historically was found all around the coast of Florida, from about Cape Canaveral on the east coast to Tampa, St. Pete on the west coast. But today, that island chain of the Marquesas is the only location on the planet that that butterfly occurs. And it's down to really, really low numbers. So we bring the butterflies back into captivity in my lab. And this is a picture, obviously, of me with butterflies in the background. And we take female butterflies, and because we can't bring plants into the lab for them to feed on, nectar plants, we have to set them up in little cups with artificial nectar. And I'm using a syringe in this picture to rehydrate little Q-tips that are in this small paper cup that the female butterfly will feed on. And it's a great artificial nectar. And it's Gatorade. And their favorite flavor is actually Fierce Melon Gatorade. And so this allows them to freely feed. It provides all the nutrients that they need, and it really extends their life. So the longer they live, the more eggs they produce in our lab. And then those eggs quickly hatch into tiny caterpillars. And this is a really cool butterfly because it has about 13 different color form larvae that feed on this plant. So you'll see in this picture green and brown and kind of maroon colored caterpillars that again are only about 1 centimeter in length at maturity. So super, super tiny. And that one little one right in the middle of the screen, that kind of pale colored little caterpillar, is one that just hatched out of an egg, and it has a width of about a human hair. So it's super, super tiny. And then I really dedicated people in my lab that their routine every day is to come in and add new food to cups, take really good care of these caterpillars. And we can produce about 1,000 caterpillars every month in our lab when it's rocking and rolling. And one other really interesting thing about these caterpillars, many members of this family of butterflies have associations with other insects. And so these caterpillars actually have associations with native ants. And in this picture, you see 2 caterpillars and 2 large Camponotus or carpenter ants. And they're not attacking the caterpillar, they're actually tending the caterpillar itself. And I have a cool little video that shows that in kind of really up close and personal means. And so here's a worker of a carpenter ant, and he's coming in contact with that caterpillar. And at the back end of the caterpillar, you see these little kind of bottle brush structures that pop out. Well, they're emitting a chemical that tells the ant, hey, I'm a good guy, don't attack me, don't make me a food item. And then they also have dorsal nectary organs, which the ants feed on, and these secrete a droplet of sugar-rich food that the ants can imbibe, and then in response for that food reward, the ants kind of usher them around on the plant and provide protection from all other predators. So the ants are kind of like little cowboys, and the caterpillars are like cattle out in a field, and they have a really mutualistic relationship. And then we also then rear those caterpillars up. We want to get as many through as possible on a monthly basis. And then once they pupate, we take them out in the field. And so these are little PVC kind of capsules, and we put little butterfly pupae at the base of them, and we deploy them out in the field. So when the butterflies ultimately emerge or eclose from that pupa, they can crawl through the top of that little PVC kind of capsule and fly away into the environment. And so this is a really easy way of taking them from the lab, growing their numbers, and releasing them out into the wild to hopefully boost their populations in one island or another, or even introduce them into new locations to establish self-sustaining populations, all in the greater effort to conserve and recover them, so that at some point in the future, hopefully this butterfly will be doing really well and it'll be able to be removed from the US endangered species list. And so here's another picture of some of our wonderful park volunteers. And this wonderful person is releasing a bunch of adult butterflies in this little pop-up cage on a kind of adjacent beachside habitat at a state park. And then hopefully they survive, they mate, and they ultimately produce more eggs in the wild, and those hatch into larvae, and those produce more butterflies, and we have this wonderful self-sustaining population that grows, all from the efforts of kind of rearing them and taking care of them in the lab. And then I want to move on to another butterfly. So unlike this small Miami blue butterfly that I just showed, this is one of the largest butterflies in Florida. And this is one of the first insects ever added to the U.S. endangered species list in the U.S. It's a butterfly called Strauss's swallowtail. For those of you that live in the southern portion of the U.S., it looks very similar to a common butterfly called the giant swallowtail, but it occurs only in these really rare habitats called tropical hardwood hammocks. These are kind of short, very dense, kind of tropical or subtropical forests, and this is the only place on the planet that this butterfly occurs. And right now, this butterfly only occurs in Southeast Florida on conservation lands on the northern portion of Key Largo and within the islands of Biscayne National Park off the southeast coast of Miami in South Florida. And it's a beautiful butterfly. And what my lab does is we go out to these little islands, we capture the butterflies, we mark little numbers on them so we can track them in the field. And this gives us a great way of kind of understanding how their population numbers are from one year to another. So this is a monitoring effort to understand how this butterfly is doing from one year to the next. And another really cool thing about this butterfly is it needs some level of habitat disturbance. And in Southeast Florida, you can imagine that the main level of disturbance is actually related to tropical storms and hurricanes. So this is one unique example of a butterfly that actually benefits from hurricanes and tropical storms hitting the coast of Florida, with the caveat that not a megastorm like Hurricane Andrew or something else, that would be devastating to these butterflies, but some glancing blows here and there actually open up the habitat for the butterfly and enhance that habitat so that it can grow in numbers. So it is really adaptive to those disturbance events. And these are also places where they don't spray for mosquitoes. So we have to wear a full mosquito garb and we can't put pesticide or repellent on our hands when we're handling these butterflies. So you see all those little salt marsh mosquitoes that are kind of dotting my hand there. And so it's a really kind of fun but challenging place to work every day. And again, I have a little video to show you about this butterfly because it's such a cool butterfly to see flying. And so this is in one of our screened enclosures here at the University of Florida where we have free flight of the butterflies. They mate in here, they lay eggs in here, and we get a chance to really see their behavior up close and personal. And it's a really beautiful butterfly. It's really just kind of mesmerizing to be surrounded in kind of like a butterfly snow globe with these guys. And then you see the eggs and the caterpillars in the lab. They're munching away on individual leaves. And one of these caterpillars will eventually become about 3 inches in length and devour 1 3-gallon potted plant in the course of its development. So they eat a lot. A caterpillar is essentially just an eating machine, pumping all that food into it and growing and eventually becoming an adult butterfly. And so here you see images from my lab. On the left-hand side are hundreds of eggs laid by female butterflies. In the middle are all the hungry caterpillars and all the food required to take care of those caterpillars. And on the far right-hand side is the full-grown caterpillar. And they have these really amazing structures called osmeteria, which are glandular structures that kind of pop out from the base of their head. And in this butterfly's caterpillar, they're pure white, and they're a defensive organ that are very repellent to ants and wasps and even lizards and some birds. And then we rear those caterpillars up individually in large 8-ounce cups. And that little tongue depressor that you see in that cup, that's there for a reason, because once they're fully mature and they are trying to seek a place to pupate, about 98% of them will pupate on that tongue depressor. So we can remove that tongue depressor, we can move the pupa around, we can mark the data about that butterfly on that tongue depressor. It makes it really handy for us to deal with. And then like the Miami Blue, one goal of this project is to take individuals and release them back into the wild. So here you see a person from my lab, and he's using a paintbrush to gently remove really young caterpillars and place them on the host plants out in this offshore island within Biscayne National Park. And then here you see an adult butterfly that has a mark on the underside of the wing, and this is a national park ranger and she's working with me to release the adult butterflies back into the national park. And again, here the goal is to build those populations up, keep them secure, and ultimately rebuild the numbers that have declined in the past so that this butterfly has a long and secure future in the state of Florida. Then I want to end today with a butterfly that I think most of you guys know really well, and that's the monarch butterfly. So you know that this is a candidate for federal listing under the U.S. Endangered Species List. It's declined significantly in number over the years. It's most well known for this annual migration, especially in the eastern U.S., where historically up to 1 billion butterflies would move from southern Canada and coastal portions and the Midwest of the U.S. down to Mexico and overwinter in high elevation fir forests. And in the West, those individuals move from the Rocky Mountains west and overwinter along coastal portions of California. And it's also a butterfly that we can invite into our yards very easily by planting milkweed. And we work on that in Florida with partners like the Department of Transportation, because when we go along Florida roads, this is one of the best places remaining in Florida for milkweed populations. And where we find milkweed, we find the butterfly. So this is a restoration project. We're working with the Department of Transportation to grow native milkweed, and then we take those plants and we outplant them along Florida roads so that they can be available for monarch butterflies to colonize, for their caterpillars to eat, and also to bloom and support the migration every spring and every fall. So this is a collaborative effort with a lot of volunteers in the field, with state agencies, all to help one single bug, the monarch, and build those populations up in an area that most people don't even consider natural habitat along roadways. But these are really rich areas that have a lot of benefit for monarchs and other insect populations as well. So that's just kind of a snippet of what I do, what my lab does. And again, I have a great job. I get to work with insects every day. And our goal is just to ensure that insects, particularly these rare butterflies, are going to be around for a long time to come on planet Earth. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys have.
Oh, Jaret, I get to work with a lot of very, very enthusiastic people, but you are in the upper echelon. Kids, if you can find something in your life that you are as passionate about as Jaret is about butterflies and insect conservation, you are set. That doesn't matter if it's sports or biology or whatever you're keen on. That was a lot of fun for me personally. That was great. If you can go into a swamp and highlight the fact that, yes, I'm being bitten by a bunch of mosquitoes and that's good for butterflies, you know that you're hooked. That's your sign. Before we dive in with questions, I'm going to give our kids a couple minutes to put their thinking caps on. We are going to play our little Kahoot together. So for those who are new to this, the faster you answer, the more points you get. And what you win is Jaret and I's everlasting respect. So there's no pressure there. And if you want to help us out with any hints for any of these questions, we'd love to have you chime in. I just a big thank you to our YouTube audience as well. Miss Turchiano's class, Miss Gina's computer lab at Arkansas, our Bob crew in Phoenix, Arizona. So nice to have such a wide audience today, all over the southern U.S. especially. So let's dive in and do this thing. And then we are going to dive in with our questions. Live classes, Mr. Henry, and you guys are going to be first. Share in the chat in case the audio is a little iffy, but I'll come to you and hopefully we can hear you guys live. All right. There's about 6,000 species of mammal. We're mammals. Bats are mammals. Antelope are mammals. How many insect species are there? Is it 150? Is it 6,000 like us? Is it 10,000? Or is it at least 1 million? Jaret, any hints for our audience today? There's a lot of bugs out there.
Well, I'll just point to my shirt. Let's say.
Oh, dear. All right, 58 in so far. What do we got? Ooh, a lot of people thought similar to males. No, Jaret, to my knowledge, we're at like 2 million plus and counting insects that we've identified, maybe a little less than that in the world.
Yeah, about that. I mean, there's a lot of species unknown to science that don't even have names yet. So that number is going to grow a lot, but that's a conservative number.
It's one of those amazing things that you can go into any forest in the world. Like you can go to Ecuador, you probably go to South Florida, and you can collect insects. And almost every time you do that, you will find a species that no one has ever positively identified before, which is mind-blowing that you can find something new to science. It's insane. All right. We talked about conservation a lot today, so I want to highlight for our audience. Insect numbers worldwide are increasing. Are they staying the same? Are they going down? Or do we have no idea? What's the general take on where insects are going in the world? And maybe think of why Jaret's role might be so necessary. Let's see what our audience says. 78 of you, so many. Ooh, so decreasing. So Jaret, that's one of the big things that certainly in the last few years especially, I've seen a lot of news around this, like insect numbers worldwide are declining, which is a real unfortunate blow to the ecosystems of the planet.
Yeah, definitely. Insect numbers are going down like other organisms. So it's alarming, but we all have a role to play in making that kind of reverse.
Yep. We'll highlight some conservation things that our students can do certainly throughout the rest of the broadcast. So we'll cover that in just a minute. The world's largest butterfly has a wingspan of what? So this is the Queen Alexander's birdwing. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous creature. Is it 5 inches across? Is it 7 inches across? Is it 11 inches? Or is it 5 feet? I might have gone a little over the top with one of these. We'll see. What do we got? 8 seconds left. I mean, just the fact that it's as big as it is, what we'll ultimately find out in a few seconds, is truly remarkable. And oh, what a split. Oh, we haven't had a split like that in a long time in a coot. So 11 inches. Jaret, have you seen one of these bird wings in person in your life?
I have. Yeah, we have several in our collection. So yeah, they're like a bat. They're super cool.
So if you go home, usually about the size of a dinner plate is about 11 inches. So if you go edge to edge of a dinner plate, that's how wide the butterfly's wings are, which is crazy. Very, very cool stuff. All right. This last question has no points. I just wanted to see what our thoughts were by the end of today's talk. So there's no credit for this. How do you feel about insects? How do you feel about butterflies? Do you love them? Are you still unsure, like you're on the fence? Or do you prefer to stay inside? The mere thought of a monarch out your window fills you with terror. Hopefully not, because I certainly love them. Jaret certainly loves them. Let's see what our audience says. I'm really curious. How influential were you in getting rid of the maybe unfortunate fear of insects? Most people love them. Awesome. Good. If 70% of folks love insects by the end, that is a pretty great sign. Let's see what that does to our podium. And then Mr. Henry, and we are coming to you first. We'll try and get you audio wise and we'll go from there. All right, Mountain Stork is third. And YouTubers, share your questions as well. Snowy New is second. And first, for all the marbles in that everlasting respect is, let's see, Inspired Dingo. Well, thank you so much for playing along, everybody. There were so many in the coot there. That's awesome. All right, Arizona, we're going to come in, third graders, and check. Let's see, can we hear you? Maybe? No, but hello. We'll say hi. And their question was, how many species?
Here, I can turn on the sound.
Come on up. Come on up. You can ask it. We can hear you now.
Okay, Ethan, ask your question. This is the one that I typed in for him. Ethan, where'd you go, Ethan? Oh, ask your question, buddy.
Yo, why are we frozen in the Kahoot?
No, how many? Yes, how many?
Species. Yeah, like how many butterfly species are there?
Yeah.
So that's a great question. So there are about 20,000 species of butterflies worldwide, and actually moths, if you like moths, which are kind of like dusty little butterflies, there's about 12 to 13 times as many moths worldwide as butterflies, but about 20,000 species.
Can we please do a talk that is just titled Dusty Little Butterflies about moths in the future? I would so enjoy that. Thank you very much for that turn of phrase. All right, Mrs. Fisher's class, Carsonville, I'm going to head to you guys. We've got Mrs. Schaefer and our fourth graders in Mr. Walsh's class too. So please do flick on your mics, everybody. We'll take as many questions as we can. We've got tons of time together. But Mrs. Fisher, if you want to lead us off with a question, you can come on in a second. We've got one for you from the chat too, Jaret. So this might be a really easy or a really tough one. Do you have a favorite butterfly in the world? What do you think?
Oh man, that is a total tough one. So I'm actually gonna say Schaus's swallowtail, which is the one I talked about today, because that's the butterfly that I kind of started with in my career, and I still think it's one of the most interesting and beautiful butterflies. And I have a personal connection because I actually met my wife through working on that butterfly.
No way. Can you tell us that story?
Yeah, sure. So I started grad school at the University of Florida, and one of my early jobs was kind of overseeing the captive breeding of that butterfly, where we bring butterflies into the lab and we breed them. And my wife started at the lab doing something different, and then she kind of moved over to help me every day put food into these cups with thousands of little larvae, and you get to know somebody pretty well with working 7 days a week feeding caterpillars. So I got to know her really well, and eventually I married her.
So there you go, students. Not only can you end up with a dream job where you get to work with the coolest people doing amazing stuff live in the field, sometimes you can meet the love of your life doing biology too. That's such a nice story. Thank you so much for that. Mrs. Fisher's class, we're going to head to you guys for a live question. Come on in. And our other live classes, please do share in the StreamYard chat as well. But come on in. Hey.
How high can they fly?
Ooh.
How high can they fly? So that's a really good question, and I'm not going to have probably the best answer to that. But like monarch butterflies, when they're migrating, they can fly at several thousand feet. So they're flying quite high and kind of using the jetties of the air to help them migrate. So oftentimes they're flying way above our heads, almost to the point where we have a hard time seeing them. But most butterflies are going to fly relatively low. It's those that are migrating that would fly really high.
Very, very cool. Thanks, Mrs. Fisher's class. You talked about the monarch a couple times, and so one of my favorite experiences in my whole life was seeing the monarch butterfly forest in Mexico. Have you had the chance to see the forest in Mexico? And you can explain just a little bit more about that, because it's a really special thing in nature.
Yeah, I have. And actually, we lead tours to the overwintering grounds in Mexico as part of the Florida Museum of Natural History kind of eco tours. So I've been about 3 times down there, and it's even for a person who works on butterflies every day, it's like mind blowing. It's kind of like taking all the butterflies east of the Mississippi and southern Canada and putting them together in only a few square miles of land. So it's kind of like, the best analogy is, you know, a snow globe, when you shake it up and everything, it's like being in a monarch snow globe. They're like surrounding you, and you can hear their wing beats because there are so many butterflies flying. It's one of the only places in the world that you can actually hear butterflies, because there are millions and millions of wing beats happening at the same time. So I've been there with people that have like broken down and cried because it's so emotional and moving.
Oh yeah, I cried. I might have to get on the next plane to go after this broadcast is done. We're going to head to Mrs. Gina's computer lab, to Queen Primary. Welcome in Arkansas. How many butterflies do you introduce back into the wild? You highlighted some of your conservation work. Can you share a little more on that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And so since about 2017, we produced in our labs here at the University of Florida over 35,000 butterflies. And I'd say about, 10,000 of those have been reintroduced into the wild. So we know how to breed butterflies. We know how to breed butterflies in large numbers. That's what we do well. And we try to get as many of those organisms back into the wild to help boost populations as possible.
I really think we get the chance to feature a lot of stories of bringing things back to the wild, whether it's turtles, bison, butterflies. It's got to be one of the most rewarding things in the whole world of science, to raise something and to put it back into a place where you think it can take off and be successful, and you can help restore a species. I think there's few more noble things than that. So that's a really cool question. Thanks, guys. All right, Mr. Walsworth's class, presumably in Arizona as well. Do butterflies ever rest? They seem like they're just constantly heading out. Jaret, what's going on?
Yeah, they do. I mean, they rest at night just like the rest of us. And they also take kind of siestas during the day when it gets too hot, or during kind of, weather events. So in Florida, because it gets hot, by midday, like say 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, it can be like 95 degrees outside during the summer. And butterflies don't kind of regulate their own temperature biologically like we do. So they're reliant on behavioral means to regulate their temperature. So when it gets super hot, they need to cool down. And the best way they can cool down is like to find a shady location and go somewhere where they're not in full sun. And same thing at night. They're not flying around. They're kind of solar powered organisms. So they rest on leaves or other plants at night and then become active again the next morning when the sun comes up.
The last time I was in Florida at 1 Eastern, it was so hot that I just got some key lime pie and I just hung out in the pier, and it was great, and the ocean breeze was lovely. So I am totally with the butterflies. Mr. Henrian's class, if you guys want to come on back in, your audio's on, so we should be able to hear you. If you've got a second question for us, come on up and take us away. Hey guys, let's see. Can you hear me now? Maybe. You should be there in theory. It doesn't like you today. It really doesn't like your text. That's okay, because you're here. So Miss Fisher's class, I'm going to come to you guys second. And Mr. Henry, keep sharing them in the chat. All our other classes. Chat. Hello, Carsonville.
How old can the butterflies get?
Ooh.
How old can the butterfly? Wow, that is a super great question. So the longest lived butterfly in the US can live about 11 months. Most butterflies, as adult butterflies, only live a few weeks. So they're really short lived. They do not live nearly as long as we do. But 11 months is the kind of the record for a butterfly in the US. And that butterfly is called the morning cloak butterfly because it overwinters as an adult butterfly, even under the snow up north.
How nice is that? We've actually never had that question in a butterfly talk, which is really weird. So it's really funny for us as people where we live like 80, 90 years to think about the lifespan of most animals, but we're the real outlier. Like most things do not live as long as us. So they burn bright. They're amazing. We enjoy them while they're around. And a few weeks is pretty special that we get to see them, so many different kinds of butterfly, wherever you might be joining from today. So great question, Mrs. Fisher's class. All right, we got another one from YouTube, and please do keep them coming. Vero Beach, we'd love to hear from you guys too. What's the smallest butterfly and what's its wingspan? We're going superlatives.
Yeah, so the smallest butterfly is the Western pygmy blue, and it's a butterfly that has a wingspan about maybe the width of your pinky. So tiny little butterfly. It occurs in these kind of coastal areas and other kind of low habitat areas out west. We have a similar species in the east called the Eastern pygmy blue, no surprise there. And it occurs like along coastal portions of the southeast, Florida, and it's really easy to overlook because it's so tiny. But if you don't know what you're looking for, you can easily miss it.
I'm going to highlight for our students, if you want to go out wherever you're joining from the world, iNaturalist is just such a great resource. If you want to find out what butterflies live near you, you can type in your city, your town, your state, province, wherever, right on iNaturalist, and you'll find all the local butterflies, and you can see some of the hot spots to where to go look for them. I've used it so many times. I found some of the biggest monarch groups back when I used to live in Toronto with it, so I can't encourage you to use it enough. It's a very, very cool resource. All right, we got a great question from online. Actually, this is sort of a segue question. How many butterflies do you capture a day? This is from Mr. Henrian's class in Arizona, and I'm going to lead us right into another one.
Yeah, but so I do go out in the field with a net, in my work, but I don't capture a lot of butterflies each day. What I mainly do is we work on butterflies in the lab. So you kind of ask it slightly differently. How many butterflies do I handle or work with every day? It's probably anywhere from a few dozen to hundreds.
So on the catching note, this is my follow-up, is how do you catch them? For people that haven't seen this before, and how do you avoid injuring them? Like butterflies are tiny, they're dainty. How are you catching them in those nets without doing them damage?
Yeah, so an insect net, it's just like a typical butterfly net you see on TV or whatever, and over some time you learn how to easily capture them. It's actually pretty simple, and then the handling of the butterflies, the more detailed part, because they are pretty fragile, and if you don't handle them correctly, you could crush their body or break their wings or break their legs. And so if you kind of grab them by the leading portion of their forewing, that's really a stable part of the butterfly, and they're actually they're more durable than you might think. But it's one thing I certainly wouldn't recommend. If you haven't tried before, don't go and try it, because you're more likely to injure the butterfly. And their butterflies are best watched from a distance unless you really know what you're doing.
This is true for all animals. We feature sloth programs. We feature whale programs. It really doesn't matter what animal you're keen on. Try and observe it from afar. If you're with a professional like Dr. Daniels, by all means, you can learn from him. You can see that up close and personal, what it's like to interact with an animal like that. But usually you're more likely to do a little bit of damage. So I'm glad that we caught that message in. Thank you very, very much for that. We got time for like 4 more questions. Time flies and you're having fun in these broadcasts. Is there a favorite part of your job? Is there something that, it means everything is the favorite part of your job, but is there anything that gets you up in the morning?
I think 2 things. One is I really do like the reward of sort of working to restore populations of butterflies. So that's kind of like the sugar on top of the cake, right? It's like the rewarding part of my job. I think the other rewarding part is I get to work with a lot of amazing people and partners every day. These are really dedicated people in, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the National Park Service, state parks, volunteers, and it's just as all you guys know, if you're with a group of friends out in the field doing fun stuff, it's super enjoyable. And so those are kind of the true rewarding parts of my job.
You are selling science so well, it's amazing. We have a class in Vero Beach. They're about to head off for a break, but they wanted to sneak in a question, and this should apply to specifically, you might know the actual plants. They want to know what kinds of plants they can plant to attract butterflies to their houses. So if you were right down the road from you in Florida, what's the deal?
Yeah, so the best way to start is just pick a lot of bright colored flowering plants, because butterflies feed on nectar as an adult, most of them do. And they're kind of generalists. They don't really have specific plants that they go to. As long as they can access the nectar, they will go to it. So, try to pick different colored plants and different kind of flower structures. And the more diversity of flowering plants you have in your yard or your school garden or on a patio, the more butterflies you will attract. And then once you know the butterflies that you see regularly, then you can plant specific host plants that support their caterpillars. But start with the flowering plants first.
Well, and you get the bonus of having lots of really pretty flowers in your backyard. So it's a win-win for everybody. And this is something that a lot of homeowners across the US, across Canada are just doing in droves now. It's a really exciting, easy way that you can help bring biodiversity to you, which is awesome. All right, we got time for one more question from all our live classes. So Miss Fisher, I'm going to head to you guys last. You can be our wrap-up class. Mr. Henrian's class wanted to know, what's the rarest butterfly? Is there one that's particularly unique and special?
So there are unfortunately several species of butterflies around the world that have gone extinct, that are no longer living on the planet. Their populations are gone. We have some of those species in the collection here at the Florida Museum of Natural History. One of the ones that you may have heard of is called the Xerxes blue. If you've ever looked online for the Xerxes Society for Invertebrate Conservation, this is a butterfly that it has the kind of namesake as being one of the first butterflies that has gone extinct because of human disturbance. So it's an unfortunate situation, but that there are a lot of species that unfortunately have gone extinct.
Yep, and we see this in all different animal groups around the world, and it's why there's so much work being done in conservation. Like the world, truly, I'll say on a hopeful note, we have had a really big impact on ecosystems around the world, but there's so many people like you, Jaret, that are doing such incredible work to rescue, rehabilitate, re-release animals like this, understand them more. So it's dark, but it's very, very hopeful, because there's so much passion and excitement and enthusiasm and sort of international collaboration around this. In fact, this year, all the world's conservationists are getting together for a World Conservation Congress in October. So we're doing better all the time, but it is really sad when we lose an amazing creature like the Xerxes blue butterfly. And I really encourage you to look it up. They're a really special animal that we unfortunately lost. Great question, guys. All right, Mr. Walsworth's class. How do butterflies survive bad weather like floods and hurricanes? They seem like they'd kick the bucket through something like that.
Yeah, so I guess it depends on how severe the impact is. So hurricanes obviously are no stranger to Florida where I live. And, some of the butterflies just kind of hunker down like a lot of the other organisms. Some might get blown, hundreds of miles away. And so oftentimes we get species that are blown into the South Florida area from Cuba or the Caribbean with hurricanes. So some die, some get blown away, some hunker down. It really depends on the situation and how bad the weather is. But, these, insects are resilient. And so they're good at surviving. Not all of them survive, but a lot of them do.
Life finds a way. It's pretty amazing what life can survive through. 5 mass extinctions and counting, and life's still kicking and diversifying and flourishing and all sorts of stuff. So I'm really glad we got that question. Guys, again, time flies and you're having fun. We are nearing the end of the broadcast. Please do. I'm going to send an email along with some really cool links, some of that monarch butterfly footage, more places you can learn about Jaret's incredible work, including the Florida Museum. If you're in Florida, they've got a butterfly house and gallery and all sorts of cool stuff you can check out there. iNaturalist is an amazing resource. And if you're keen on insects in any way, email us at exploringbytheseatofyourpants. We will pass you all the cool resources to keep the excitement going. But we're going to wrap up with one more question from Mrs. Fisher's class. Come on in and take us away, guys. Hey.
Do you guys have any poisonous butterflies?
Ooh.
Any poisonous butterflies? So There are no butterflies that are like really poisonous to humans, but there are butterflies like the monarch that use chemicals from plants and incorporate those chemicals into their body, which makes them very distasteful to, say, birds or other predators. So a lot of the really brightly colored butterflies, particularly those that are like orange and black or black and yellow, they're advertising to predators like birds and lizards that they taste really, really bad. So they're not necessarily going to kill the organism, but they would make them really not want to eat them.
I love that you mentioned this because you see this in skunks, you see this in snakes. Creatures don't want to be eaten, but you only have one chance to prove that wrong. You don't want something biting you and then finding out you're venomous. So most creatures that have a poison in them have a big advertisement to be like, don't touch me. And so we recognize that too. People see creatures like that and sort of have an instinctual like, oh, I should probably stay away. Skunks were the big one when I was growing up. So I love that question, Mrs. Fisher's class. That was great. Before we wrap up, Dr. Daniels, is there any last message you want to leave us with about the amazing work you do about butterflies before we bring in all our classes to say a big thank you and farewell?
Yeah, I think the biggest message is that, insects and other wildlife, they need our help. And all you guys can do something. You can work with your families. You can plant a butterfly garden. You can go volunteer at a park and, plant trees. You can clean up areas. All of this makes a big difference. So every one of you can make a really big impact.
There's no better message than that. We hear that in all our conservation programs. And honestly, kids, you generation, you are doing this. You live and breathe this stuff. I think everyone thought my generation was going to be the real go-getters, and it's not. We were okay. You guys rock. Like, you kids know this stuff. You're so keen. You come to programs like this. So please do keep up the great work. Follow up for more. We'd love to see you back in a program soon. And Jaret, what we do to wrap up every broadcast, I'm going to bring in our kids to say a big thank you and farewell. If you're at home in Arkansas or Florida or whatever, scream and yell, annoy the principal too. You have my permission. But Mrs. Fisher's class, you're our live on camera group. Come on in. Thank you so much, everyone. Bye for now, everyone. See you all soon.